You're about to see one of the most shocking and emotional rescue stories we've ever shared on this channel. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because stories like this, real stories of survival, hope, and second chances, deserve to be seen. These dogs weren't just abandoned. They were buried in silence, forgotten in a place no one was supposed to find. But something happened, something no one could have predicted. Stay with me, because what you're about to see will leave you speechless. The morning sun had barely kissed the horizon when the truck rumbled down the abandoned dirt road, its engine coughing black smoke into the crisp autumn air. In the rusted bed, pressed against the cold metal, lay Luna, a very old female dog whose amber eyes still held traces of trust despite the neglect written across her matted coat. Nestled against her emaciated body were three tiny puppies, no more than 6 weeks old, their eyes barely open to the cruel world they'd been born into. Luna had once known love. She remembered warm hands, a soft bed, and the laughter of children. But when her owners discovered she was pregnant, everything changed. They saw burden where there had been companionship, expense where there had been devotion. And so, on this cold October morning, they made their decision. The truck stopped abruptly near an old mining area, long since abandoned and forgotten by the town. The man who emerged didn't look at Luna as he roughly grabbed the wooden crate containing her and her babies. His face was set in grim determination, his conscience apparently silenced by whatever justification he constructed in his mind. Luna whimpered softly, instinctively curling tighter around her puppies, 2 females and 1 male, each no bigger than a potato. The golden female, whom Luna licked most frequently, had a small white patch on her chest. The brown male was the smallest, often pushed aside by his larger sister, a reddish pup with their mother's coloring. They mewled and squeaked, completely unaware of their fate. The hole yawned before them like the mouth of some ancient creature, a forgotten well shaft, perhaps 30 feet deep, its walls lined with crumbling stone and slick with moss and decades of moisture. It had been covered once, but time and weather had reduced the wooden planks to rotted fragments. Local authorities had discussed filling it in for years, but budget constraints and bureaucracy had left it open, waiting. Without ceremony or hesitation, the man tilted the crate. Luna's claws scraped desperately against the wood as she felt herself sliding. For one terrible moment, she was airborne, her body instinctively twisting to shield her puppies. Then came the impact, a sickening thud as they hit the muddy bottom, followed by the splash of icy water. Pain exploded through Luna's left hind leg, but she didn't cry out. Her only thought was for her babies. Frantically, she nosed through the darkness, her heart racing as she counted 1, 2, 3, all alive, all whimpering, all terrified but breathing. She gathered them close, her body trembling with shock and adrenaline. Above them, she heard the truck's engine start. The sound faded into the distance, swallowed by the wind that whistled across the opening of their prison. Then there was only silence, broken by the soft mewling of her puppies and the distant caw of crows. Luna looked up at the circle of gray sky far above. The walls were impossibly steep, slick with algae and rainwater. Even if her leg weren't injured, even if she weren't weak from malnutrition, there would be no climbing out. This was meant to be their tomb. But Luna had something her cruel owner hadn't accounted for, a mother's fierce determination to survive. As the first drops of rain began to fall into the pit, she curled around her babies, her body forming a protective shell against the cold. The golden puppy whimpered, and Luna licked her gently, a promise in that simple gesture. We will survive this. We will see the sun again. The first night was the longest. The temperature dropped, and water pooled at the bottom of the pit, forcing Luna to stand on 3 legs, holding her puppies above the frigid puddle. Her injured leg throbbed with each heartbeat, and hunger gnawed at her insides with savage teeth. The puppies cried constantly, confused and cold, their tiny bodies shivering despite their mother's warmth. Luna discovered a small indentation in the wall, barely a ledge, but enough to keep them out of the water. She placed each puppy there carefully, then dragged herself up beside them, her body blocking them from the wind that howled through the opening above. In the darkness, she could hear things moving, rats, perhaps, or other creatures that called this hole home. By the second day, Luna's milk had nearly dried up from stress and dehydration. The puppy's cries grew weaker, more desperate. Luna licked at the moisture on the walls, desperate for water, and found small puddles in the crevices where rain had collected. It wasn't much, but it was something. She would make her tongue wet and let the puppies suckle it, giving them what little moisture she could. The third day brought a miracle of sorts. A pigeon, perhaps disoriented or sick, fluttered down into the pit. Luna's instincts, sharpened by desperation, took over. She caught it with a quick snap of her jaws, ending its life swiftly. She ate every scrap, bones and all, knowing this sustenance meant milk for her babies, meant another day of survival. The raw protein helped, and by that evening, the puppies nursed with renewed vigor. Luna began to howl then, long, mournful cries that echoed off the stone walls and carried up into the world above. She howled at dawn and dusk, her voice growing hoarse but never stopping. If there was even the slimmest chance that someone might hear, she would take it. She howled for her babies, for their future, for the life they deserved. Days blurred together. Luna learned to catch rainwater in her mouth during storms. She found insects crawling on the walls and ate them without hesitation. She kept her puppies clean, licking them constantly, maintaining their dignity and health even in this nightmare. They were growing despite the circumstances, testimony to Luna's stubborn refusal to let them perish. The golden puppy, brave and curious, was the first to try standing on wobbly legs. Luna watched with pride, mixing with sorrow. Her daughter was trying to live, trying to grow, even here in this dark hole. The little male followed soon after, tumbling over his own paws, but persistent. Only the reddish female seemed listless, and Luna worried constantly, keeping her closest, sharing what little warmth she could spare. A week passed, then 10 days. Luna had lost track of time, measuring her existence only in the rhythm of day and night, light and dark. Her injured leg had swollen grotesquely, and fever made her thoughts swim. But still she howled, still she protected, still she fought against the destiny someone had chosen for them. It was on the 12th day that Luna heard something that made her heart leap, a sound that didn't belong to the pit. Voices, human voices, faint and distant, but Sarah Mitchell had been hiking the Greenwood Trail every Saturday for 15 years. She knew every bend, every notable tree, every viewpoint along the 5-mile loop. But this particular October morning, she decided to venture off the marked path, curious about an old mining road she'd noticed on historical maps of the area. The 52-year-old elementary school teacher was an avid photographer. In autumn, the mountains provided endless subjects. The golden aspens, the way morning mist clung to the valleys, the dramatic shadows cast by ancient pines. Her German shepherd, Ranger, trotted ahead, his tail wagging as he investigated every interesting scent. It was Ranger who first noticed something wrong. His ears perked up, and he froze mid-stride, his body going rigid with attention. Sarah had learned to trust his instincts over the years. "What is it, boy?" she asked, moving closer. That's when she heard it, a sound so faint she almost missed it beneath the wind. A howl, not the wild, haunting call of a coyote, but something more desperate, more broken. Ranger whined and moved toward the sound, his nose working overtime. Sarah followed, pushing through overgrown brush and stepping carefully over rotted logs. The sound grew louder, more insistent. And then she saw it, the opening in the ground, partially hidden by fallen branches and tall grass. Her heart seized as she realized what she was looking at. An uncovered well or mine shaft, exactly the kind of hazard that should have been reported and sealed years ago. She approached cautiously, Ranger right beside her, and peered over the edge. The morning light didn't penetrate far, but movement in the shadows below caught her eye. She pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it down into the darkness. What she saw made her gasp aloud. Far below, pressed against the stone wall on a small ledge, was a dog. A golden-colored dog, so thin her ribs showed starkly beneath matted fur. And nestled against her were 3 tiny puppies. The mother dog looked up at the light, and the hope in her eyes was so palpable, so desperately human, that Sarah felt tears spring to her own. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "Oh my God, how long have you been down there?" Luna howled again, louder now, encouraged by the presence above. Sarah's mind raced. The pit was at least 30 feet deep. The walls were too steep and unstable for her to climb down, even if she'd had the equipment. She needed help, and fast. With shaking hands, Sarah dialed. The next 2 hours were agonizing. "I need emergency
Sarah watched
services,"
as Luna
she said the moment the operator
puppies,
answered. "Licking
"I'm
them
on the
clean,
old mining road
arranging them
off Greenwood
carefully
Trail
on the narrow
and there's a
ledge.
dog with puppies
She could see
trapped
one of the
in
mother
an
dog's
old well
legs
shaft.
was
They're
badly
alive,
swollen,
but I don't know for
and her
how
heart
long."
ached at the
The
thought
operator's
of what
response
these animals
was
had
professional,
endured.
but
She talked
tinged
to
with
Luna
concern.
constantly.
"Ma'am,
Her
I'm gonna
voice
transfer
carrying
you
down
to our
into
animal
the pit.
control division.
Help is coming,
and also
sweet
dispatch
girl.
fire rescue.
Just hold on.
Can you stay
You've
at the
been
location?
so brave.
I'm
so
not going
strong.
anywhere.
Help is
Sarah
coming,"
said firmly,
and Luna seemed to
looking down at
understand.
Luna.
Her tail
"I'm staying
attempting
right
a
here
weak
until we're
wag
safe."
each time Sarah spoke. The fire truck arrived first, followed closely by an animal control van. Fire Captain Rodriguez took one look at the situation and immediately began organizing the rescue. "We're going to need the confined space rescue equipment," he told his team. "And someone get Dr. Chen on the phone. We'll need a vet standing by." Lisa Parker, the animal control officer, joined Sarah at the edge of the pit, her expression turning from professional concern to pure horror as she took in the scene. "How was this even possible?" she muttered. "This shaft should have been filled in years ago. Can you save them?" Sarah asked, her voice breaking. Lisa looked at her, with determination blazing in her eyes. "We're going to do everything we can." The rescue operation was complex. Firefighter James Kowalski, the smallest member of the team and certified in confined space rescue, was lowered down on a harness, a specially designed animal carrier strapped to his back. As he descended, Luna watched with a mixture of hope and fear, her body tensing as this strange human drew closer. "Easy, girl," James said softly as he reached the bottom. "I'm here to help. I promise." But Luna's maternal instinct kicked in. Despite her weakened condition, she positioned herself between James and her puppies, a low growl rumbling in her chest. She had protected them for 12 days against cold, hunger, and darkness. She wasn't about to let them be taken by a stranger, even one who might mean well. James understood immediately. He'd worked with traumatized animals before. Instead of reaching for the puppies, he slowly sat down on the muddy floor, making himself smaller, less threatening. He pulled out a piece of beef jerky from his pocket, his own snack, but he had no hesitation in offering it. "Look," he said gently, tossing the food toward Luna. "I bet you're hungry. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt your babies." Luna eyed the food suspiciously, but didn't move toward it. Her puppies were making small mewing sounds, and she licked them reassuringly, never taking her eyes off James. Above, the rescue team watched through a camera James wore on his helmet. "Take your time," Captain Rodriguez said through the radio. "Build trust. We're not leaving until they're all safe." James tried again, this time tearing the jerky into smaller pieces and tossing them closer to Luna. "You've done such a good job, Mama. You kept them alive. But you must be so tired." It took 45 minutes of patient, gentle coaxing before Luna finally reached out and took a piece of jerky. The burst of flavor of real food seemed to break something inside her. Suddenly, the exhaustion of 12 days crashed over her. Her legs began to tremble, and she swayed slightly. James saw his moment. Moving slowly, telegraphing every movement, he reached out his hand. Luna sniffed it, her whole body quivering with the effort of staying conscious. And then, in a gesture that would bring tears to everyone watching above, she licked his hand, a sign of trust, of surrender, of desperate hope. "That's my girl," James whispered, his own voice thick with emotion. "Let's get you and your babies out of here." He gathered the puppies first, placing each one carefully in the padded carrier. They squeaked and wriggled, and Luna watched with intense anxiety, but she didn't snap or growl. Something in James's gentle handling told her this human was different. Getting Luna herself into the carrier was more challenging. Her injured leg made movement painful, and she was weak from starvation. In the end, James had to carefully lift her, whispering apologies as she whimpered in pain. But she let him do it, seemed to understand that this was the only way. "We're ready," James said into his radio. "Bring us up." Slowly, the ascent seemed to take forever. Luna pressed her face against the carrier's mesh, watching the circle of light grow larger and larger above them. The puppies squirmed against her, and she licked them continuously, reassuring herself they were still there, still safe. And then, after 12 days in darkness, they emerged into the light. The moment the carrier cleared the edge of the pit, a cheer went up from the rescue team. Sarah was crying openly, and even the hardened firefighters wiped at their eyes. Lisa immediately opened the carrier, her trained hands quickly assessing each animal. "The puppies seem stable, just malnourished," she reported. "But the mother, her leg is badly infected. We need to get them to a vet immediately." Dr. Angela Chun was waiting at the emergency veterinary clinic when the animal control van pulled up. She'd cleared her schedule the moment she got the call, and her team was ready. They worked with swift precision, separating Luna from her puppies only long enough for simultaneous examinations. The news was both heartbreaking and miraculous. Luna had a compound fracture in her leg that had become severely infected. She was dehydrated, malnourished, and suffering from exposure. By all rights, she shouldn't have survived. But she had, through sheer force of will. The puppies, despite their ordeal, were in remarkably good condition. Luna had sacrificed everything to keep them alive: her health, her strength, her own chances of survival. She had given them every drop of milk her starving body could produce, every bit of warmth, every ounce of protection. "She's a fighter," Dr. Chin said, gently stroking Luna's head as sedatives began to take effect before surgery. "And she's not done fighting yet." The surgery to repair Luna's leg took 3 hours. Dr. Chun and her team worked meticulously, cleaning the infection, setting the bone, and doing everything possible to save the limb. When it was over, Luna was wrapped in warm blankets, and 4-drip providing the fluids and nutrients her body so desperately needed. Sarah had refused to leave. She sat in the waiting room the entire time, Ranger at her feet, checking her phone constantly for updates. When Dr. Chun finally emerged, still in her surgical scrubs, Sarah leapt to her feet. "She made it through surgery," Dr. Chun said with a tired smile. "The next 48 hours will be critical, but she's stable. And the puppies are doing well. We got them on supplemental feeding to take the pressure off their mother while she recovers." "Can I see her?" Sarah asked. In the recovery room, Luna lay in a large, padded kennel, her injured leg wrapped in bandages. The 3 puppies were nestled against her, having been returned once she was stable enough. Even in her sedated state, Luna had sought them out, her nose gently nudging each one. Sarah knelt beside the kennel, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered. "You saved them. You saved them all." Over the next few days, Luna's story spread through the community like wildfire. The local news picked it up, and soon it had gone viral on social media. People were outraged by the cruelty, heartbroken by the suffering, and inspired by the courage. Donations poured into the veterinary clinic, far more than needed to cover Luna's medical expenses. But the outpouring of emotion brought something else too: leads. Multiple people called in, recognizing Luna from the photos. The investigation was swift. Within a week, the man who had thrown Luna and her puppies into that pit was identified and arrested, facing animal cruelty charges that could result in significant jail time. Luna herself seemed to understand that she was safe now. As her strength returned, so did her spirit. She greeted her veterinary caretakers with tail wags and gentle kisses. She watched visitors with those wise amber eyes, as if she could see into their souls and judge their character. The puppies thrived. The golden girl, whom the clinic staff had named Hope, was bold and adventurous, the first to explore beyond the kennel. The little brown male called Chance, Dr. Chun made her natured and cuddly. Luna was well enough to be released, The reddish female continued care Grace physical therapy. Had been the weakest initially, the question now was proving to be resilient. The clinic had been inundated with adoption applications. Hundreds of people wanted to give Luna and her puppies a home. But Sarah had made a decision the moment she'd looked down into that pit and seen a mother's desperate courage. "I'd like to adopt her," she told Lisa Parker. "Luna and all 3 puppies. If that's possible." Lisa smiled. She'd been hoping Sarah would say exactly that. "I think I will be perfect. But I have to warn you, Luna's leg will never be 100%. She'll likely have a limp for the rest of her life. And 4 dogs is a lot of responsibility. Ranger could use some siblings," Sarah said, looking down at her German Shepherd, who had come with her to every single visit. "And Luna deserves a home where she'll never have to worry about being abandoned again." The home visit was merely a formality. Sarah's house was perfect. A large fenced yard, plenty of room, and an owner who clearly had the time, resources, and love to dedicate to 4 dogs. The adoption was approved immediately. The day Sarah brought them home was sunny and warm, one of those perfect autumn days when the sky seems impossibly blue. She'd set up 4 new beds in her living room, bought toys and food, and prepared her home for the arrival of her new family. Luna stepped out of the car, cautiously, her injured leg still bandaged, but healing well. She looked around at the quiet suburban street, the neat houses, the green lawn. Sarah led her into the backyard, and Luna's reaction was immediate. She sat down in the grass, real grass, not the cold stone of a pit, and tilted her face up to the sun. Tears ran down Sarah's face as she watched. "You're home," she whispered. "You're really home now." The puppies, released from their carrier, tumbled out onto the grass with excited yips. They'd never known anything but the darkness of the pit and the clinical environment of the vet clinic. This explosion of space, of smells, of sunshine, was overwhelming in the best possible way. Hope immediately began investigating a butterfly. Chance discovered his own reflection in the glass door and barked at it. Grace stayed close to her mother, more cautious but equally curious. Ranger approached Luna carefully, his tail wagging slowly. Luna watched him, and for a moment, Sarah held her breath. Then Luna's tail began to wag too. She touched her nose to Ranger's, and an understanding passed between them. Ranger gently licked each puppy, accepting them into his pack. The first night was an adjustment. Luna clearly had trauma from her ordeal. She whined when the lights went out, and Sarah found her trying to herd all the puppies into the smallest corner of the room, seeking the security of tight spaces. Sarah understood. She left lights on, played soft music, and slept on the couch so Luna could see her. By the 3rd night, Luna had relaxed enough to sleep in her own bed, though she kept it positioned where she could see all her puppies at once. The transformation over the following weeks was remarkable. The dog who had been thrown away, left to die in darkness, began to trust again. Sarah documented their progress, sharing updates on the social media page that had formed around Luna's story. People around the world followed along as Hope took her first real walk through a park, as Chance learned to play fetch, as Grace overcame her shyness to become the most affectionate of the 3. But it was Luna's progress that touched hearts most deeply. Her limp was permanent. Dr. Chun had been right about that, but it didn't slow her down much. She learned to navigate stairs, to play gentle games of tug-of-war, to run, albeit with an uneven gait, through the backyard with her puppies. And she learned to trust again. The first time Luna voluntarily approached Sarah for pets, rather than simply accepting them, Sarah cried. The first time Luna brought her a toy, inviting play, was a triumph. The first time she fell asleep on the couch next to Sarah, her head resting on Sarah's lap, was a moment of pure healing. The puppies grew rapidly. At 3 months old, they were already showing their distinct personalities. Hope was indeed bold and fearless, often getting into mischief that her more cautious siblings avoided. Chance remained the sweet soul of the group, the one who brought toys to share and always checked on his sisters. Grace had blossomed into a confident, joyful dog who loved nothing more than cuddling. Luna watched over them all with a mother's pride and protectiveness. She taught them how to behave, correcting them with gentle nips when they got too rough, showing them by example how to trust these kind humans who had given them this wonderful life. Ranger became an honorary uncle, wrestling with the puppies and teaching them dog manners. 6 months after the rescue, Sarah organized something special. She contacted everyone who had been part of saving Luna and her puppies. The 911 operator, Captain Rodriguez and his fire crew, James Kowalski, Lisa Parker, Dr. Chun, and her veterinary team, and invited them to a reunion in her backyard. It was a beautiful spring day, and Luna's puppies were now lanky teenagers, all legs and oversized paws. When James arrived, Luna's reaction was instant. Despite not having seen him since that day in the pit, she remembered. She limped over to him, her whole body wiggling with joy, and placed her paw on his knee. The same gesture of trust she'd given him in the darkness below. James knelt down and wrapped his arms around her, his voice thick with emotion. "Look at you," he said. "Just look at you now." Dr. Chun examined Luna's leg, pleased with how well it had healed. "She's defied every expectation," she said to Sarah. "I wasn't sure she'd walk again, but she's living her best life." The celebration was joyful. The puppies played with the firefighters, showing off their tricks. Ranger orchestrated games of chase. Luna moved among the guests, accepting their love and praise with dignity and grace. Captain Rodriguez took dozens of photos, his tough exterior cracking every time one of the puppies licked his face. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Sarah stood watching her dogs play. Luna came to sit beside her, leaning against her leg as she often did now. Sarah looked down at this remarkable animal, this survivor, this mother who had refused to let her babies die. "You know what the best part is?" Sarah said softly, scratching behind Luna's ears. "That man who threw you away thought he was ending something, but he didn't realize he was actually creating something beautiful. Because of what happened, you found your way to me. Your puppies have amazing homes lined up." At this, Sarah's voice caught. The decision to keep all 3 puppies hadn't been realistic long-term. They needed space to grow, to develop their own identities. After much thought and careful screening, Sarah had found perfect homes for each of them, but all within the same town, all with families who had committed to regular playdates. Luna's family wouldn't be separated, not really. They'd grow up knowing each other, seeing each other, loving each other. The following month brought both joy and bittersweet moments. Hope was adopted by a young couple who trained therapy dogs. With her bold, confident personality, Hope would spend her life bringing comfort to people in hospitals and nursing homes. Chance went to a family with 2 gentle children who needed a patient, loving companion to help them cope with their father's deployment overseas. Grace found her home with an elderly woman who had recently lost her husband and needed a devoted friend. The day each puppy left, Luna watched with what Sarah could only describe as understanding. She sniffed them thoroughly, licked their faces, and seemed to be giving her blessing. It was as if she knew they were going to good homes, that they would be safe and loved. And true to the promise, the families gathered every other weekend at the local dog park. Luna would arrive with Sarah and Ranger, and her face would light up when she saw her puppies racing toward her. They were getting big now, nearly her size, but they still greeted her with the enthusiasm of puppies. They would play together, the whole pack, while their humans chatted and built their own friendships. A year after the rescue, Sarah stood at the edge of that pit again. The county had finally filled it in and erected a memorial marker. It read, "In memory of the courage and survival of Luna and her puppies, and in honor of the compassion that saved them, may this serve as a reminder that every life has value." Sarah had brought Luna, wanted her to see it. Luna sniffed around the area, and Sarah wondered what she remembered, what she felt. Then Luna did something unexpected. She sat down, tilted her head back, and howled, just once a long, beautiful note that echoed through the trees. It wasn't a cry of pain or desperation like those howls from the pit. It was a song of triumph, of survival, of a life reclaimed from darkness. When she finished, she looked up at Sarah and wagged her tail, ready to go home. They walked back to the car together, Luna's limp barely noticeable now, her coat gleaming in the sunlight, healthy and loved. Sarah thought about that day a year ago, about the choice Luna's former owner had made, about the different choice she herself had made to stop and look down into that pit. Life pivots on such moments. One person's cruelty had been met with another person's compassion. One act of abandonment had been answered with an act of rescue. And in the balance, for lives had been saved and transformed. Luna's story made headlines one final time a year later when the man who had abandoned her was sentenced to 2 years in prison and permanently banned from owning animals. But for Sarah, for Luna, for all the people who had been touched by their story, the real headline was simpler and more beautiful. They had survived. They had healed. They had found love. On Luna's 3rd rescueversary, Sarah threw a party. All of Luna's puppies came with their families. Now fully grown, Hope was a certified therapy dog. Chance had helped his adoptive family through their father's return from overseas, and Grace had become an emotional support animal for her elderly owner, who credited the dog with saving her from crushing loneliness. The dogs played together as if they'd never been apart. Luna, now 8 years old, played more gently, but with no less joy. Her limp was more pronounced on cold days, but she never let it stop her. She had become something of a local celebrity. Sarah occasionally brought her to schools to teach children about compassion and responsibility toward animals. As the party wound down and the sun set over the backyard, Sarah sat on her porch steps with Luna's head in her lap. Ranger dozed nearby, and through the window, she could see the photo she'd had framed, the only picture that existed from that day, taken by James as he descended into the pit. It showed Luna, gaunt and desperate, but with her puppies protected behind her, her eyes full of fierce determination. "You know what you taught me?" Sarah said softly to Luna. "That sometimes the worst things that happen to us can lead to the best. That being thrown away doesn't mean you have no value. It means someone failed to see your worth. And that a mother's love really can move mountains, or at least get you out of 30-foot pit." Luna's tail thumped against the porch, and she looked up at Sarah with those amber eyes that had seen darkness and emerged into light. In that gaze was trust, love, and peace. They were meant to die down there in that forgotten hole, left to vanish as if they'd never mattered. But destiny intervened in the form of a hiking teacher with a camera, a German shepherd with keen senses, and a community that proved that compassion is stronger than cruelty. Luna and her puppies didn't just survive. They flourished. They loved. They made a difference in the lives of everyone who knew their story. And every day, Sarah looked at Luna and was reminded that sometimes being in the right place at the right time means everything. Sometimes it means 4 lives get a second chance. Sometimes it means that light wins over darkness. Sometimes it means that love, in all its forms, is the most powerful force in the world. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sunset paints the sky gold, Sarah swears she can still hear the echo of those howls from the pit. But now they sound different in her memory. Now they sound like what they truly were all along. Not cries of despair, but songs of hope. Hope that someone would hear. Hope that someone would care. Hope that someone would save them. And someone did. Luna lived to be 15 years old, surrounded by love every day of her life. She passed peacefully in her sleep on a warm summer night, with Sarah beside her and Ranger keeping watch. Her puppies, alerted by their families, came to say goodbye, and it seemed Luna had waited for them. After they arrived and each pressed their nose to hers one final time, she took her last breath with the same courage she'd shown in that pit years before, surrounded by love, knowing her babies were safe, understanding that her life had mattered. In her final years, Luna's story inspired stricter animal cruelty laws in 3 states and led to the funding of a rescue organization in her name. The pit where she'd been thrown had become a memorial garden, a place where people came to remember that even in our darkest moments, hope survives. And sometimes visitors to that garden swear they can hear it, a gentle howl on the wind, not of pain but of joy. Luna's song, still singing, still reminding the world that every life has value, every creature deserves compassion, and that love will always find a way.